Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Bugra. Quick intro. I am looking after digital assets at HSBC globally from the macro perspective. And today we will have a conversation with great guests. We will do a quick round of intro, but first like a background. So on-chain privacy has been one of the critical subjects in the wider adoption of digital assets. And we see more people adopting privacy-enhancing technologies. We see more and more use cases. And today I am with three guests, and we will have a conversation. So, Fahmi, let's start with you. Let's start with a one-line introduction and a quick fun fact about the network that you represent.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here at the Innovate Thai event to watch our panel when it's so sunny and warm outside and you're not by the pool. So thank you for sharing your precious time with us. I'm Fahmi. I'm president of the Midnight Foundation. I'm English. I would have preferred to be prime minister. We don't do presidents very well in the UK. But the Midnight Foundation is a new ZK L1 that is also cooperative with other L1s. We want to be the ubiquitous privacy layer for all of blockchain, unifying all assets in a single private vault that you can use for collateral management, medical data, supply chain solutions. One fun fact about our network. We launched with 13 federated node operators who are more than validators. They will build payment solutions, proof server solutions, and various other interesting things with us. And one other fun fact, you can come and play scratch cards on our network very soon.
Okay, over to you, Yaya.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Yaya Fanusie, Global Head of Policy for the Aleo Network Foundation. And Aleo is a layer one, a ZK-based blockchain, programmable and private. And if I were to say a fun fact about the network, you know, when you first asked about the network on the email, I thought you meant like my personal network, like a fun fact. And I was like, oh, man, what can I tell you about my network? But we're not going to go there. I won't talk about my personal network. But the network, the Aleo network, for the audience, fun fact, the architects of the blockchain, which I said is a ZK-based, private, and programmable, many of the authors of the white paper, which led to the Aleo blockchain, were also the authors of the original Zcash white paper, and are still involved with Aleo as technical advisors. So you can sort of see an evolution from Zcash as a private chain to Zexi, the white paper, which was about private and programmable. That Zexi white paper became the Aleo network.
Yeah, and I'm Kyle Rojas. I lead institutional efforts across North and South America with the Ethereum Foundation. I've led protocols. I was in TradFi and I was military before that. Now just a big crypto and AI nerd. One fun fact is that there are very few technologies in the world that are as complex as the operations and transactions on Ethereum that have gone this long without breaking down. So almost 11 years of uninterrupted uptime. The only, there's a few, maybe GPS and a couple others, but every other internet structure has gone down at some point in time, either for maintenance or just literally broken. So it's pretty crazy to think about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, great networks and great representations. Very excited. Okay, let's start with the first question. So, Fahmi, let's start with you. How does your network define privacy? And where is the line between transparency and the user confidentiality?
Yeah, great question. So we think privacy has to be a core feature of your infrastructure. You cannot add privacy after the event. It's much harder. The example I gave in New York last summer was, imagine this middle-aged man standing in front of you, walking out his front door completely naked and then getting dressed. Once you see my naked middle-aged body, it ain't pleasant. You can't get it out of your head. It's already exposed. It's too late. So privacy has to be starting. You leave the house clothed. If it gets hot, like it is in Miami, I might take my jacket off. I might roll up my sleeves. That is selective disclosure. I show you what you need to see and nothing more than you need to see it. That gives me enough comfort, gives you enough comfort, and we can have a conversation without you getting scared and running away. So we put the ZK proof at the core of our infrastructure. It is on the side of the client, their side of the firewall. So you have all your data stays off chain in your databases, in your chain. and then you present it as a cryptographic proof on midnight. So full data protection, but also more importantly, metadata protection. When you think about data, the data package itself is important, but who's sending it and who's receiving is just as critical. So we believe the metadata, protecting that is super important. So that's how the ledger works. And then on top of that, we built a smart contract that allows programmable privacy. So we come from the same, fun facts, as the ZK paper as Aleo and Zcash. We've just taken a slightly different route. We admire what they do, but we think the programmable privacy and that metadata protection is very key to enable flows from large corporates, bring Web 2 to Web 3, so we end up with a Web 2.5, the merger of blockchain as a truth layer to other services.
Yeah, thank you. And Kyle, over to you maybe if you would like to add something to this, because I know that from our conversations you are very keen on the ZK applications. How about Ethereum perspective?
Yeah, so when I think about what privacy means, it's private writing on the blockchain, private reading, and then private proving. ZK does that. Ethereum, up to this point, hasn't had that on the layer 1. It's been experimented on in layer 2s and now is production ready. And so ZKs are now battle tested enough to go to the layer 1, where the purpose of layer 1, well, there's many purposes, but it's not going to house the entire world's transactions. It's going to be the HTTP, the global, credibly neutral, no counterparty risk settlement layer. And then the HTTPS environments, the custom-built layer 2s, these software stacks, that's where you'll have the full privacy applications with ZK built into the layer 1. And you can build anything from KYC, AML, single sign-on, gasless, which institutions are wanting. And so you'll be able to do that as an institution, as a business, and then just have the fail-safe of that layer 1 with a global historical state that you can always revert if the layer 2 has something go wrong because you have your transaction data there. And then what does privacy mean? It's the people building it, whatever it may be, an app chain or a dApp, whatever, being able to selectively decrypt and show to a regulator, a compliance person, an auditor, but mathematically you can't do that with ZK proofs. So I do think ZK is really important, not only for finance, but for identity. When voting, passports, hospital records, anything, I think ZK is a really powerful technology.
Yeah, thank you. And what you mentioned is KYC, AML, the identity aspect, and these are the things that especially regulated activity, institutional activity needs, right? So Yaya, I want to continue with you, linking to this, actually this aspect. Where is the real demand for privacy strongest today? And is it in retail? Is it in DeFi? Is it institutions or the enterprise level? What is your perspective? Where is the demand coming from?
I would take a stab at this from a different perspective, because the question is, you're saying, where will people want to use these solutions? Where is their demand in the real world, right? And I would say you have to not be theoretical. Actually, I think the demand, the use case demand, is in what we already see, where there's an assumption of confidentiality with transactions. So that's what you have to look at. And if we're talking about financial use cases, retail payments, everyone here, not even on the crypto side, everyone here using TradFi expects that when they do a transaction, that the sender, recipient, the amount is not exposed to the rest of the world. So I would say we already know there's demand in retail payments. We also know in institutional payments, right, in enterprise, because these are areas where confidentiality of transactions are already assumed, right? It's the state of play. So the demand is there, and if in the crypto spaces we're building, it has to be, well, what are the use cases where people already need this? That's where the demand is going to be. And I want to riff off of something, excuse me, that Kyle said about that distinction between the HTTP and the HTTPS, which is a great example, because what I think you're pointing to there is that when commerce was only able to proliferate on the internet when you had a system or an encryption that would ensure that only the user and the sender and the receiver, the person that's transmitting and the person receiving, had access to that data, not anyone on the internet who could try to tap into that transmission, right? So that allowed for commerce. So it's similar in the crypto space. We have the HTTP world, right, that most of us are dealing with, but not the S, which I believe stands for security or secure. The S is secure. So when we're talking about making the blockchain transactions private, secure, we're doing really the same thing. We're ensuring what people expect. When you transmit, when you transact, your information, the user, it should not be exposed to the rest of the world.
Yeah, good point. The demand is there definitely. And for example, we are in Miami right now, and we are at the Consensus, Innovate Miami, different events. Maybe you want to do some cheeky spending, and you don't want to be exposed to publicly, right? So this is one of the, of course, a very casual example, and there can be other examples for institutions and everything. And Fahmi, if you give your perspective on this one, where would you see the demand coming from?
The demand is going to come from institutions. I know we're very focused in this iteration or the previous iterations around retail, but retail don't bring huge volumes. Retail, real flow, real transaction volumes, whether it's in finance, in supply chains, come from institutions. And I know that may go against what some of the purists believe in blockchain, but the reality is they're already here. I was at Consensus in the main hall, and the first stand you see is JP Morgan Connexus. The institutions are already here. If you're not solving for their problems, they will come and you will get washed out. They will ride your innovation wave and come and wash us out. So the question is, how do you still stay true to the ethos of blockchain, decentralization, self-sovereign identity, ownership of your own data, but still build solutions that service that, but also service those institutions? So the demand is there, but the problem with those solutions from the institutions is they are siloed. They are private permission networks. And JP Morgan Coin, when I spoke to them briefly, their JP Morgan Coin is an internal IOU for their clients. It cannot be used. So it's actually worse than having a US dollar cash account with JP Morgan. So they need connective tissue. So I'm going to be a little bit arrogant maybe and leave my English humility and say, we've got to go from HTTPS to HTTPM, M standing for midnight. Because midnight solutions are enabling privacy to be extended to any other network, whether it's private or permissionless. The problems I see within crypto and blockchains is every blockchain wants to be everything. And that's not how technology works. I come from TradFi. I spent 20 plus years in hedge funds. Equities are listed on an exchange, but they rarely trade on an exchange. You trade them in banking venues, lit venues, dark venues, ACNs, aggregators. And then you don't sell them back on the exchange, you settle them at custodians, JP Morgan, State Street, Boney. So everybody's trying to build a privacy layer or privacy solutions. What does that do to institutions and builders? They've got to build different solutions for every network. Why not think about a universal privacy layer, identity layer that can be pinned? And Midnight's tokenomics allows other networks to use it without having to own our token. That's the other issue with blockchains. It's tribalist, because you have to own the token and you become a maxi, and then you cannibalize that token to transact on your network, which doesn't make sense. You want your capital investment to go up in value. You want your transactions to be certain, predictable, both cost and capacity. And from Midnight's perspective, we can offer that privacy with cost and capacity predictability, not only for native builders, but also foreign blockchains, foreign institutions. And that's why I think the innovations will go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So, okay, then we have now different perspective from the different networks angle. So I want to ask Kyle, what is the one concrete use case that is running the network that you represent, Ethereum, enabling further privacy? And I will ask this to each one of you. One concrete use case, tangible takeaway use case.
Yeah, I'd just to start with maybe what's not fully ready yet, where it's FHE and other things are, they're great, but it's not actually being used in production. One thing are these software stacks like ZK Sync's Providium, Linea, that now just went to the Linux Foundation, Lineth. You can build in, again, all of the privacy angles. And so that's real-world tokenized deposits across many banks on the ZK Sync Providium called the Carry Network. And so that's like literally happening right now. There are dozens of institutions I'm talking to that are building in these stacks. Some are building in Besu, which is essentially 1.0, and then these stacks are Besu 2.0 because that's just a private copy of Ethereum's layer 1. And so they're used to EVM. They've built out their teams building EVM. And so now they're just moving on to these chains that can actually build it in production in public chains, but still have full privacy. And now you have this thing called the Ethereum economic zone, which is just essentially ZK proof aggregation, where each proof is the chain state, and you can aggregate those, and within one Ethereum block, have all of those sync into one proof aggregation, and then you can have synchronous within the same block, complete interoperability, which it's really cool, and it was just possible a couple months ago because ZK proofs are now fast enough and cheap enough to make it reasonable. Because I was trying to build that at Avail for 2 years, the technology just wasn't there. Now it is.
That's awesome. Fast and cheap ZK proof. I think, yeah, there are good developments definitely. And how about you, Yaya?
So I'll try to give you something that's Googleable because everyone's in the audience, and when you're on your phones, hopefully it means you're responding to what I'm about to tell you. So if you Google Humanity Link and Mercy Core, you'll get either news or a social media post about something which Aleo infrastructure is being used for. So these are humanitarian organizations that deal with providing humanitarian assistance, and they developed a program using Aleo's infrastructure to come up with private payments that could be used by humanitarian recipients of humanitarian aid through a network of merchants who receive this. And so excuse me, this is something that we've supported. And for us, the idea is, it shouldn't be that you're talking about the blockchain, when it comes to these use cases. It should be actual institutions that are solving problems, a humanitarian use case, merchants who are trying to receive payments for certain recipients. That is something that we're supporting. We also have relatedly integrations with stablecoin issuers, regular stablecoin issuers, to make stablecoin transactions private. So we have an integration with Circle, USDCX, as well as Paxos Labs USDG, which is USAD. Basically what it is the ability for you to take your regular stablecoin, provide it into a vault that the stablecoin issuer has, and then through integration with Aleo's chain, you're able to, as a user, mint a token that's connected or backed by that stablecoin token, but then it has all the features of privacy from operating on the Aleo chain. So you really have this link between, again, the exposed, and maybe it's a new term, maybe you can say May 6th, you heard it here. I'm calling this exposed stablecoins, because that's really what, the ones that we're used to, these are exposed. That's the way to think about it. These are stablecoins where your data, everything is exposed. So you take that exposed stablecoin, put it in a vault, and yeah, it's exposed there, but now you as a user can operate in an ecosystem where all of your transactions aren't exposed to everyone on the internet.
Awesome. How about you?
I love that example, by the way. Congratulations. I'm a great believer in private stablecoins. And I'll give you an example why, just in this audience. Imagine you work at a single startup. You're a small team, you see each other's faces every single day, and then your company decides to pay you in stablecoin. The first thing I would do in that company is go and check the wallet that paid me. If it's a transparent wallet, I'll make sure there's enough funding to keep paying my salary, maybe check the reserve accounts linked to that wallet. But then I'll create a distribution curve for all the other stablecoin payments that went out the same day. And unfortunately, you guys on the left-hand side, you get paid less than everybody on the right-hand side. How does that make you feel? Are you about to move, right? Too late. That's the problem with exposure of stablecoins and stablecoin payments on a blockchain which is visible. So what they're doing at Aleo, we agree with very much at midnight. I'll give you an example of a real world use case coming to midnight. So we announced at New York DAS a partnership with a UK-regulated bank called Monument Bank. They're a neobank. They have new technology and the legacy architecture of older banks, backed by the Bank of England, regulated by the Bank of England and the PRA. After 4 years of searching, they have decided to tokenize their clients' cash deposits on midnight, a public permissions blockchain, but in a way that they create private deposits that only they and their clients get to see. Phase one, backed and approved by the Bank of England, one of the preeminent federal central banks in the world. Phase two is where are bringing RWA issuers. issuers are on fractionalized access to private equity, hedge funds, bare metals, and other things, which give better yield. Nobody needs money market funds on blockchains. You can get it cheaper on the real world. But access to these high net worth individuals, these clients, in a way they can't get through traditional finance rails where the minimum deposit size is beyond their means. And then phase 3 of that project is to take those assets privately and use it for Lombard lending, collateralized lending. Elon Musk bought Twitter not by selling Tesla, by leveraging his Tesla shares. And this is providing the same capabilities to these high net worth individuals. So that's with a regulated bank, with approval from a regulated central bank, coming within a permissions network, because they can create these private enclaves within our permissions network. So they're no longer siloed, because the beauty of that relationship is also they built the tech stack that can be leased to any bank globally. And there are already 3 or 4 other banks lined up to utilize this. So they would be the first proof case for their own technology platform, starting with $250 million by September, getting to about $2 billion by next year. And we see huge opportunities because the RWA technology exists. Supply is abundant. There's no distribution channels. Who's buying it? There is a high net worth bank. There are other banks coming to midnight ready for that distribution channel. And we're very excited by that partnership.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we have only 2 questions left and only 7 minutes left. That's why we will do a rapid fire round, maximum 60 seconds responses for each. So the next question, Yaya, let's go with you. So we have had significant developments in the regulation, especially in US, in Europe, in Asia last year. And this year also these developments are going on. So what does a regulation compliant privacy stack look like on a chain?
Ooh, what does it look like? A compliant. So basically, you're asking like, what is the regulation for private regulated token or stablecoin? I'll pick stablecoin. So this is what I'll say. I will say, I'm not going to be so bold enough to say exactly what it looks like because I'm actually dealing with this right now. We are ahead of the curve. Those of us that are on this stage, some of us in the audience, we're ahead of the curve because I look very closely at the regulations that are being implemented now. Here in the US, the Genius Act is being implemented. That was a landmark legislation last year. So what you're seeing now, those of you that are, pay attention, you'll see all these different financial regulators, they put out all of these rulemakings. This is how Genius will be implemented. I know I only have 20 more seconds. What's missing in how Genius is being implemented is there's very little about privacy. So all the financial regulators are saying, here are the rules, here are the AML rules, here are the consumer protection rules, here are this and that. But they're not saying anything like the OCC, for example, about, well, how do you deal with blockchain transparency? If my financial behavior is now public, well, then what's the consumer protection around privacy there? There's nothing on it. So some of us, that's my job. I'm actually talking to regulators to say, next round, you guys are going to have to talk about how to address privacy with stablecoins. They're not doing it yet. We're ahead of the curve, and that's what's next.
Noted. How about you, Kyle?
I'll make it quick. It looks customized by vertical, by sector, and jurisdiction. HIPAA for medicine, SEC and CFTC for finance, also tokens in the States. Even if it's Franklin Templeton's Benji in the States, has to be a different Benji in a different jurisdiction. So it is completely customized by sector and jurisdiction and geography.
Yeah. Fahmi?
Yeah, I agree with both my panelists here. Look, yes, we're ahead of the regulators. There's no mention of privacy. The Genius Act is overlooked. Blockchain today are surveillance tools. Everything you do is there forever. And if you don't get doxed today, the AI bots will dox you tomorrow. So if you're buying something you shouldn't be buying in Miami, buddy, you get caught out in a couple of years. So it's talking to regulators. I'm always one who wants to, in my TradFi days, in my blockchain days, we want to be speaking to regulators. We want to kind of direct we want to be involved in conversations that help us direct the journey. I was on a panel with a couple of banks, and they said, they're waiting for the regulators to go and innovate. I've never heard anything as absurd as that. The regulators changing the laws allows them to go innovate. How about we innovate and speak to the regulators, change the laws to align? When HTTPS came and the internet came, there were no regulators. They help direct regulations, and now those centralized parties control regulations. And the banks, whether the Clarity Act has been diluted, it supports those existing institutions. So again, we should work together, we should collaborate, and take this case forward around what things happen. But again, regulation is not a singular tool. You need customizable toolkits, a passport that unifies how you access certain things. So somebody logging in to Aleo, to Ethereum, to Midnight has a set of rules that defines their sovereign identity and jurisdiction they are in, so they can go and access the right type of assets, the right kind of healthcare. That is also missing. The whole UX experience, blockchain needs to evolve, otherwise the institutions will come and take over.
Thank you so much. So I want to close with the subject of our panel. If primacy matters, which we understand now within this discussion that yes, it matters, do public blockchains lose? Very quickly, 60 seconds, 1 minute each. Start with you, Fahmi.
We don't lose. Look at us. We're here. We're already here. At the earlier place for existing blockchains to work with private blockchains. Public blockchains enable a level of connectivity that permission private blockchains don't. So, as I said, we have a regulated bank coming to work for us. We're going to reveal a potential clearing custody solution that's viable on Midnight tomorrow that can bring TradFi. I have healthcare innovation and research happening on Midnight today in California. So we're here, and we're not going away, but we have an uphill battle against some of the more private, wealthier chains.
I want to use different nomenclature because sometimes we'll be confused when we say public versus private chains, because remember, is it private like permissioned? So I want to say what the future is private permissionless. So it's so everyone's clear. Oh, we're talking about permissionless, but it's going to be private. There's not saying that there's not room for other types, right? There are other types of use cases. So, but in terms of expansion, private permissionless.
I'd say, let's say Ethereum layer 1, it's got 2/3 all stablecoins, 2/3 of all tokenized assets, 8.5 more times in DeFi than the next closest chain, more than all of them combined. And so I wouldn't say it's won yet. There's only 25 billion tokenized assets out of a $400 trillion TAM. So does it win or lose? I wouldn't say that. I say someone who's found product market fit like that evolves, which is what the layer 1 is doing, which is what the layer 2s are doing. And so it's not something that's set it and forget it. It's an entire world building this global settlement layer with the associated networks.
Awesome. Well, we are perfectly on time. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.